Welcome to Video Village. I'm Mihir Shah, and today we're talking about Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. Later in the show, I'll be ranking all of the Marvel movies I have ever seen. But first, let's talk Phase 5 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I just saw this movie today, and I got a lot of thoughts. So I'm going to try to break it down into, first just thoughts about the movie that's completely spoiler-free, and then my overall thoughts on the state of the Marvel Cinematic Universe right now, where we're at, where I think it's going to go, and I guess how I'm thinking about it as somebody who has never been a comic book fan, but has enjoyed the Marvel journey throughout the years. Not so much in the last 5 years, but certainly the phases one to three. Let's start with the movie. Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania is the third Ant-Man movie. Ant-Man was number 1, and Ant-Man and the Wasp was number 2. This is essentially a story that is supposed to be kicking off a new villain in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and this villain is going to be the main villain for the next 2 phases at the very least. That villain is Kang the Conqueror, played by Jonathan Majors. And right off the bat, let me say I think he was probably my favorite part of the movie. He is a really good actor, and his character seems to have a lot of depth to it, to the point of I'm not rooting for him, but I want to learn way more about him. I want to see him use his power to the highest degree. He's a very, very interesting person on screen. He looks great. I wish they showed him shirtless. It's a weird thing to say, but Jonathan Majors is ripped. I don't know if you've seen pictures of him, but he's huge. He's going to be starring in Creed 3 that's releasing, I believe, next month, and he's also huge in that. He's just a really good looking guy. I don't know how else to put it. So yeah, I wish I saw more than just his arms. I really wanted to see everything. This is a weird way to start off the conversation about Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, but if you watch the movie, I think you'll agree. He's just a good looking guy. Okay, moving on. Let me talk about the plot of the movie. So the plot of the movie is essentially Scott Lang, played by Paul Rudd, is just having a good life in San Francisco. He's living with his girlfriend Hope, who is the Wasp, and he has a decent relationship with his daughter, Cassie. So Ant-Man was I guess gone during the blip, the period of 5 years where Thanos snapped half of the universe's existence away. He was not actually snapped. He was stuck in the quantum realm, which is discussed in Avengers Endgame. But after that whole period, his life has been going very well, and he is a successful memoirist, and he's written a book about his life and his adventures with the Avengers in the last couple of movies, and he's doing great. He's no longer on house arrest like he was in the last movie, obviously, and his life is kind of finally peaceful. Meanwhile, his daughter Cassie has taken on the role of an activist. She's seen in the first 5 minutes of the movie in jail because of a protest that she was leading, and it's very clear that she is on her own hunt for justice, the same way that most superheroes are. This causes a rift in their relationship, and this kind of sets the emotional background of the story. Meanwhile, you have Hank Pym, played by Michael Douglas, and his wife Janet, who is now returned to Earth after the events of both Ant-Man and the Wasp and the Avengers blip or whatever. And it's clear that Janet, who was stuck in the quantum realm for 30 years, has still not really opened up about her experience in the quantum realm. It's very clear that it's presented like she has a lot of emotional baggage and isn't really opening up about things. And that's pretty much it in terms of things I can really talk about without spoiling anything in the movie. I guess, it's called Quantumania because very quickly they are thrust into the quantum realm in this movie. And the entire movie is spent in the quantum realm. You're you're not in the real world for more than maybe 15 minutes of total runtime. And I love the Ant-Man movies. I don't know exactly why they've kind of taken on the mantle of like meme movies. There's a lot of like there's a big narrative around like there's just like dumb movies, or they're just comedy and not really good superhero movies. I thought the first Ant-Man was like really fun and probably one of the more purely entertaining Marvel movies I've seen, where you could just have a good time and not have to worry about like, wait, who is that character and what's this stone and why are they going there? It was just like, yes, it's very easy to understand what's going on here, and Paul Rudd is really funny. Ant-Man and the Wasp, I felt very similar about. There's a lot more stuff about the quantum realm in there, but you love the characters already, and it's just very purely entertaining. I think one thing that helps with those two movies is that the cast is the same and the director is the same, and for the most part, it's a pretty closed story as opposed to some of the bigger series. If you think about like Captain America 3, aka Captain America Civil War, that had every Avenger basically in the movie. Thor Ragnarok had Thor and the Hulk. There's a lot of those movies where it's focused on one character, but there's a ton of very important characters in there. I like the first two Ant-Man movies, and really this one for that reason, where it's a really close story. It's pretty independent. You don't need to know that much about the Avengers world or the Marvel world when you go into this movie. At least what I'll say is I don't know more than what's in the past movies, and maybe it's just some inklings of things that I've heard that are going to happen in the future. I don't know really anything about the character Kang the Conqueror. From what I understand, Kang the Conqueror is a very, very powerful villain and a huge character in the comics. I think he's been around for a very long time. And when he was announced as the main villain for the next couple of phases for the Marvel movies, I think the general vibe was like, okay, everybody's going to die because Kang the Conqueror is really powerful. And that's really exciting. I like the vibe of, okay, if we're moving on to new phases and we're moving on to new characters, I would love to see some awesome character deaths and some really epic, showdowns where the good guys don't win. That's one of the main reasons I love Avengers Infinity War, is because finally, after basically a decade of always seeing the good guys win and not really any person you care about dying, suddenly it felt like anyone was could be on the chopping block. So that was really fun. There's a ton of CGI in this movie. Obviously, we're in the quantum realm for the whole part. And some of the CGI I didn't find amazing. Some of the CGI is really great. They built a pretty huge world in the quantum realm. I think the overall world they built is cool, but a lot of the creatures I was not impressed with necessarily. Some of the fight sequences are really cool. One of my main qualms of the movie that I don't think is a spoiler is that you're not watching 5 characters be together the entire movie. They're kind of split up in the quantum realm. And I think that was the part that I really didn't enjoy the most. The fun part about the first 2 Ant-Man movies is that you get a lot of banter between the characters, and you still have some really good moments here. It is a pretty funny movie at times, but for the most part, you're more so just wondering about the plot of the movie and the new characters that are being introduced. There's a lot of open questions, and so the comedy kind of takes a backseat to like okay, who's that guy? Why is this important? What is he talking about? I gotta say, I get turned off by that pretty badly. Let's talk about some casting. So you have Paul Rudd and Evangeline Lilly as Ant-Man and the Wasp, respectively. I already mentioned Jonathan Majors as Kang the Conqueror. Michelle Pfeiffer and Michael Douglas play a really fun, older couple. I think they were great in the second movie too, but they were also fun in this movie where it was more of a serious tone for the most part. Some supporting cast members that were really fun to see. William Jackson Harper, at least from where I know him, is The Good Place. He was great in this movie. He has maybe 5-6 minutes of real screen time, and he was very funny, and yeah, great to see him. Bill Murray shows up in this movie for 5 to 6 minutes, and he's also great. He had a lot of funny moments, and plays, I guess, a very supporting role. He's really just in the movie to show you that Kang the Conqueror is a bad guy and maybe introduce some doubt into your mind as to who we should be trusting on this in this world. But he was great. Corey Stoll, who played the villain in Ant-Man, the original movie, shows up in I won't say cameo, but shows up in a pretty goofy way in this movie. And he was great too. He was probably one of the funniest parts of the movie. I won't spoil anything as to why or how he's in this movie. But yeah, I'll just mention that he's great as well. So yeah, a lot of good casting in terms of like side characters that we probably won't see ever again in a Marvel movie. Well, maybe we will. I don't know how they're gonna bring them back, but yeah, fun to see these guys. The movie has made, I believe, almost $400 million as I'm recording this podcast, which I think it's only been like 4 days since this movie came out. The long weekend with President's Day obviously helps the fact that a lot of people want to go see a movie over the long weekend. People seem to not like this movie. The reception has been pretty mediocre. I think it has like a 40% on Rotten Tomatoes, 47% on Rotten Tomatoes. Metacritic gave it a 48 out of 100, which is not great. Again, like I don't really like to use Rotten Tomatoes or Metacritic as a way to judge a movie, but in terms of just using it as like a basis to understand what people are saying, like sure, I'm surprised that it's this low, considering the fact that I have seen a lot of Marvel movies in the last 5 years that I thought were definitely worse than this one and got way higher ratings. So if you're looking at those, I recommend watching the movie. It's not bad, and it is the first real look we get at Kang the Conqueror. Kang the Conqueror apparently shows up in the last episode of the show Loki. It's a Marvel show on Disney Plus that came out earlier in 2022 and also serves as, I guess, narrative context for this story. And that's really where I can transition into the conversation about where Marvel is today. In 2022, I think Marvel came out with over 5 original television shows. And that's all fine and dandy if those shows are, just original stories that don't actually make an impact on the movies. But that's not true at all. In fact, if you didn't watch WandaVision, for example, you would not really understand the movie Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I watched that movie, luckily, after having seen WandaVision, and I still didn't really understand parts of it because there's another show, I think the show is called What If, that gives a lot of context to one of the main characters of that movie. The movie starts out with one of the main characters and Doctor Strange. I'm saying one of the main characters because I don't remember her name. I think her name is like America Ferrera. Maybe that's right. I don't know. I have no idea who she is. They're like running away from a monster at the beginning of the movie. And there's not really an explanation as to who she is or what her powers are. I mean, you kind of get to understand a little bit about her powers and like why she's important to Doctor Strange, but not really. I mean, you don't really get like an emotional connection. Like if she died in that movie, I would be like, cool, like I don't care, let's move on. She was kind of a drag anyway. There is just too much content coming out of Marvel. There's too much quantity, and a lot of it ends up being mediocre and maybe just like entertaining at the most. There's no real emotional impact from a lot of these movies and television shows because there's just too much to consume. You can't really tell an audience to care about a villain if there's 17 other villains presented over the course of like 18 months. At least that's how I feel. I just don't get what Marvel's plan here is. So recently, Kevin Feige stated that they will be shying away from quantity in the next phase, which Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania is the first movie of Phase 5. And it sounds like now in Phase 5, they're really going to be chilling out on the whole TV thing and just focusing on the few movies that they've announced for each of these phases, which I guess is good news, but I don't know. I mean, apparently Loki was probably one of the best shows that Marvel's created. And so it's complicated because, if it's a good show, it's a good show. I just wish that it wasn't so integral to the plot and the enjoyment that you get from these movies. That being said, like Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, I don't think you really need to know anything about anyone from the shows, But it sounds like if you did watch Loki, you would understand a lot more about who the bad guy is and what he's capable of, which I didn't. I wanted a lot more from the bad guy of this movie, which, okay, I guess you do get a pretty good grasp as to how powerful Kang the Conqueror is in this, but not really, because they leave out a lot of detail that me, as somebody who has no idea who this guy is, was looking for. And I don't think there's a movie coming out that's like, hey, Kang the Conqueror, this is just a movie about the bad guy. There's no Joker movie that's coming out that's going to explain everything. We're going to get the story of Kang the Conqueror in bits and pieces over the next year or two. And then the final movies of not Phase 5, but Phase 6 is Avengers, the Kang Wars, or something like that. So he is set to be like the Thanos of an Avengers movie, but not for a while. And so, yeah, as somebody who like wanted something game changing, like I wanted like a new tone, I wanted a reset from a pretty like mid Phase 4 of the last 2 years of Marvel movies. I did not get that from this movie. So yeah, that's all I'll say about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I recommend people see it if you are a Marvel fan. It's not like a Captain America Civil War where like if you don't watch it, you're going to be very lost in the upcoming Avengers movies. It's pretty isolated, and that I think that's a strength, like I said. So yeah, I think you should go watch it, but it's not in the top 15. I'll say that. It's not in the top 15. Really quickly, I want to talk about the phases of Marvel. Marvel, releases movies in phases. If you're not familiar, everything from the first Iron Man movie to Avengers Endgame, or I guess Spider-Man: Far From Home, which came out right after Avengers Endgame, all of that is phases 1 through 3, which is also labeled the Infinity Saga. Everything after that is the Multiverse Saga, which is going on right now. So we have Phase 4, which started with Black Widow in 2021 summer and ended with Black Panther: Wakanda Forever this past November. Phase 5 just kicked off with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And here are the movies that are coming out in Phase 5 over the next year and a half. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, just coming out this May. The Marvels, coming out later this year in November. Captain America: New World Order, 2024. And then these next two movies are like summer and late summer. Thunderbolts and Blade. And then Phase 6, you have... I didn't know this. In Phase 6, you have Deadpool 3, which is a shock to me. I didn't realize that Deadpool was going to become part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It is a Marvel movie, but it's never been part of this whole series. Fantastic Four, I don't know if you know, but they're making a third Fantastic Four movie. And then you have Avengers: The Kang Dynasty in 2025 and Avengers: Secret Wars in 2026. So that's, I guess, 10 movies between Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and the end of Phase 6. And I am not excited. I really could not care less about anything that is going to be released between now and like Avengers: The Kang Dynasty. The one I'm most excited about right now is probably Deadpool 3. That's completely false. That's not what I meant to say. Wow, that was literally like a verbal typo. Like I was reading one thing and I said something else. I could not care less about Deadpool 3. Sorry for all you Deadpool fans. Deadpool 1 was great. Deadpool 2 was mid. I don't expect anything from Deadpool 3. I am a little excited about Fantastic Four just because I really like the original with Jessica Alba, Chris Evans, and I don't know that guy's name. Yeah, it's a tough sell. I think like a good way to compare Phase 4, 5, and 6 is to look at like the corresponding movies that took place in phases 1, 2, and 3. So if we look at Phase 2, comparing that to Phase 5, considering each saga is 3 phases, here's what Phase 2 consisted of: Iron Man 3, Thor: The Dark World, both movies that are like at the bottom of my list in terms of Marvel ranked, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers: Age of Ultron, and Ant-Man. So those final 4 were, for the most part, some of the best movies in the series. And everything after that was really, really exciting. There's probably like 1 or 2 misses, but everything in Phase 3 was like really, really exciting. We had a great stretch of like 4 years where every Marvel movie that came out was kind of a big deal. And that's just not the way it is anymore. I don't know if I don't know if I can blame it on the amount of content. I don't know if I can blame it on, the pandemic and how that's just changed people's relationship to movies. But what I will say is that during the pandemic, the only movies that kind of were successful were Marvel movies. Spider-Man No Way Home is like, I don't know, top 5 of like the highest grossing movies of all time. And it wasn't even released in China. So if it was, it probably would have been number 1 or number 2. So people are seeing these movies. I believe there's a statistic about opening releases where each Marvel movie that is released, the last 31 movies, they've all opened number 1 on the weekend that they open. So people are watching these movies. And that's fine because you have a huge fan base for the Marvel movies. You have now 15 years almost of an audience relationship being built. And so that's expected that people are going to come out and watch that movie the same way people came out and watched Top Gun Maverick because they had a 35-year-old relationship with Top Gun, the franchise. It's just a little sad because I don't see the quality and emotional depth that the first saga had on the world being replicated in this next saga. So I'm a little, yeah. I don't even say I'm sad because we get enough Marvel things as it is, but I just wish that it was better, especially for like kids and teenagers right now who like this is the movies that they're growing up on as like superhero movies. Marvel just doesn't really seem like all that exciting. Each movie just kind of feels like they're leading up to something else, or it's kind of like half-baked, or it's called the multiverse saga. And I don't know if you feel this, but there's been a ton of multiverse content, and I get that like that's the whole point of these movies, is that the war that's going to be taking place is taking place through different universes and different timelines. But it is exhausting to watch so many movies and not really understand the logic of anything happening. Spider-Man No Way Home had a multiverse aspect to it. That's how all of these characters came together in one movie. Sure, super fun. How did it really work? I don't know. It doesn't matter because it was a good time. Then the next movie that's released is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And okay, another multiverse, except they only go to one other universe. Cool. How does this work? I don't know. It's just, fun, cool characters. Oh, there's John Krasinski from The Office. And then you have Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, and now they're in the quantum realm. But Kang the Conqueror goes through different universes. So, like, what's happening? I don't know. It's just too much. Not to mention you have movies like Everything Everywhere All at Once that are just completely different, but also about the multiverse. So I think as like general audience members, I can imagine that a lot of people are getting frustrated by just not understanding what the hell is going on. And that's a serious issue if you want people to actually come out and be excited for these things. Like the Infinity War thing, it kind of made sense because you got a glimpse of stones throughout other movies. But if you did not understand the whole Infinity Stone concept, it did not make a difference until Avengers Infinity War, when the whole movie is about those stones. And that's good. I mean, like, I'm sure the stones were present in other movies. Like, I know they were in Thor. I think they were in a Captain America movie. But, like, it's not integral to the plot. That's not what the movie's actually about. It's just, like, kind of in there so that people who love those movies can piece together a narrative. This is, like, just so messy that I just don't understand how they're going to tell a story that takes place through multiple universes and multiple timelines that actually makes sense with the last 3 movies that they've released. I felt like the logic was very different in each movie that came out about the multiverse. And it's just a little stupid. That's all I'll say about Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. Go see the movie. It's tough to talk about it without spoilers. If you are curious about where Marvel's going to go in the future and want to kind of keep up, if you can't understand it, neither can I. But yeah, let's take a short break and we'll get into Marvel rankings. Alrighty, so I have seen 26 Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. Now, just to clarify, these are movies that are part of like the Infinity Saga or the Multiverse Saga. So this excludes any X-Men movies. This excludes Deadpool. This excludes any of the old Spider-Man movies with Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield. And this excludes like the Spider-Verse movies that are animated. I think that covers all my bases. I don't know the best way to introduce the rankings. I think the only way I can really say is like I tried to take into account the importance of the movie in terms of its cultural impact, its effect on the rest of the franchise, and of course, how good the actual movie is. And without further ado, let's get into it. So, let me list out all of the Marvel movies from the first movie being Iron Man to the last movie being Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. The movies are Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, which I have not actually seen. The Incredible Hulk stars Edward Norton, who was replaced by Mark Ruffalo for the rest of the franchise. And so, honestly, just growing up, I was like, okay, that movie doesn't matter because that's not the same actor. And I never saw it. Moving on, Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, the First Avenger, The Avengers, Iron Man 3, Thor, The Dark World, which is Thor 2, Captain America, The Winter Soldier, that's Captain America 2, Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers, Age of Ultron, Ant-Man, Captain America, Civil War, that's the third Captain America movie, Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Spider-Man Homecoming, Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther, Avengers Infinity War, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Captain Marvel, Avengers Endgame, Spider-Man Far From Home, that's the Infinity Saga, and then we get into the Multiverse Saga, Black Widow, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Eternals, Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Thor Love and Thunder, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. I think that is 31 movies. Maybe I can't count, but I think it's 31 movies. Of those 31, I have seen 26. So the movies I have not seen and because of that will be excluded from this list are The Incredible Hulk, Captain Marvel, Black Widow, and Thor Love and Thunder. So wait, I have seen more than 26, whatever that was. I've seen 28 movies, 29, 28. Yeah, I haven't seen just 3 or 4 of them. All right, let's get into it. At number 26 on my list, this is tough. Not because there's like a ton of good movies, but almost the opposite. There's just like a lot of like mid Marvel movies, in my opinion. I think the top 5 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe are just really good movies. I think the top 10 has a lot to appreciate about it and to kind of embrace. And then 11 through 15 is like, okay, you know, it can interchange out. And then I just think that like 16 to 26 are like differing levels of like, okay, fine. So with that in mind, number 26, I have Thor The Dark World, which is effectively Thor 2. I couldn't tell you one thing about this movie. I just found it so unmemorable. I think the acting is like decent by Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston, who plays Loki, but it effectively didn't matter. And like if it didn't come out, nothing. I don't think anything really would be that different, barring the fact that Natalie Portman basically leaves the franchise for 10 years and comes back in Thor: Love and Thunder. It had some stuff in there about an Infinity Stone. It effectively doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, and yeah, the action was kind of dull. The story was just really bland, in my opinion. Yeah, it was just not super fun. Number 25, I have the Eternals, or not the Eternals, just Eternals. Which it's so sad that this was a bad movie because they were really set up for success. The director, Chloe Zhao, won an Oscar the year before for Nomadland. Obviously, she had probably already finished filming the movie by then. But I think something to mention when it comes to how Marvel has been operating for the last couple of years is that Eternals is one of a couple movies that were directed by auteurs or, you know, notable directors that have a very distinct creative vision. And I think Marvel had this idea where they were like, let's get these directors who are critically acclaimed and are really good making these smaller movies, and let's give them a ton of money and effectively let them cook. And the first one I can think of that did that is Black Panther, directed by Ryan Coogler. He did Fruitvale Station and Creed, I believe, and then jumped into a huge franchise with Black Panther. And Black Panther was a great movie, but they take these directors who have these unique creative visions and basically throw them into a machine where they have some creative direction, but a lot of the times there's a lot of people in the room making those decisions with them creatively with the script, what the beginning and the end of the movie probably have to be and things like that. I'm sure Ryan Coogler had a lot to do with the costume design and the actual intricacies and layering of themes that made Black Panther such a good movie. But when it comes down to how the franchise moves forward, it's not him making those decisions. It's Kevin Feige and 100 other people, 5 years ago telling him what to do. So Black Panther was that. Eternals was that. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness was that, with Sam Raimi behind the wheel. And of course, Thor Ragnarok was also that, with Taika Waititi. A small indie director who made some fun comedies, who now is in charge of a huge franchise movie with not one but two main superheroes starring as leads. So I just find it interesting. I'm not sure if it's to bring a certain critical acclaim to movies that may not otherwise get that attention. I'm not sure if it's because Marvel genuinely cares to have interesting stories being told by interesting people. I'm not sure. I just find it an interesting pattern that doesn't really guarantee the success of the movie, with Eternals being a good example. They had a super diverse cast, which was awesome, and a lot of people in the cast that I love, but it just was not successful at all. The story was set up to be this huge thing, and then kind of just ended up being like Civil War, but really, really bad, because we didn't care about any of the characters enough to really understand what was going on. I'm not even sure what that world does for the rest of the franchise. Eternals basically introduces this idea that there are these huge eternal beings that have predetermined everything or something like that, and they basically these beings, these eternal superheroes can't get involved in human affairs. There's all this stuff in there. I'm like, what does this mean for the rest of the franchise? Because obviously now they're getting involved in stuff, it seems. So I don't know. It just made no sense. I gotta move on because I'm gonna get angry. But yeah, what a dumb movie. I saw an edit on Twitter that was basically one of the final fight scenes in the movie without music and without most of the dialogue, but just with some dialogue. And it was wild that it was infinitely better. I mean, parts of this movie were directed very well. It was just kind of bogged down by a bunch of nonsense. All right, number 24 is Iron Man 3. This movie, when I first watched it, I didn't hate it. But now when I revisit it 10 plus years later, it's just a whole lot of nothing. I think the most memorable parts of it were when Tony Stark's house is attacked by the terrorists he basically instigates. And that was a really intense scene where Iron Man basically ends up getting thrown into Ohio or something. And that was fun. And that's really the best part of the movie. And that was maybe half an hour into it or something. Just kind of not great storytelling. And I believe one of the main issues with it was the way that they introduced the main villain. And I think they corrected how the villain was introduced in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. He comes back. I'm talking about Ben Kingsley. I don't remember who the character he played was because I don't think it actually mattered. I think they brought him back in Shang-Chi just to be okay, we know we messed up 10 years ago, so here's a version of that villain that actually makes sense. Number 23, Avengers Age of Ultron. I actually like this movie, so I don't want people to think that because it's so low on the list that it's bad. It's a fun time. There's a lot of cool stuff in here. Some of my favorite parts, probably the dream sequence that I think it was Thor or maybe all of them. I think all of them kind of go through this like dream sequence that Wanda kind of puts them into. And some of that stuff was really cool. You see Captain America's broken shield. You have Thor in this like weird, creepy dancey ballroom sequence. Yeah, so some really cool visuals. I like the fact that Wanda is such a powerful villain that ends up obviously turning into a good person and then later turns into a bad person again. But she was great. I forgot her brother's name, but it's very obvious that he was going to die in that movie because you literally don't care about him. And then obviously when he does die, you also don't care about him. So that was just very ineffective for me. I think the themes of the movie were presented as something that was going to be really, really strong and affecting. And I don't think it really had that effect by the end of the movie. Everything to do with like Ultron and this idea of like, do we protect the world by shielding it and maybe abusing our power? All that stuff is way more effective in Captain America Civil War than it is here. One of the best sequences in Marvel history, I think, is the sequence where they're all around the table and they're all trying to lift Thor's hammer. And that happens in this movie, so props to them. But yeah, I just think that it wasn't nearly as effective. And for an Avengers movie, a lot of the fighting wasn't really that hype compared to even the first Avengers movie. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is my 22nd movie on this list. This came out in 2022, just about a year ago. And it's directed by Sam Raimi, and it's the first Marvel Cinematic Universe movie to really introduce pure horror elements. There's some pretty like creepy sequences in this movie, and some of the most intense sequences when it comes to just being really, really visually off-putting. I think my main issue with this movie is that, I think I mentioned it before, but it's just that the movie is called Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, the Multiverse of Madness. Damn, have I been saying multiverse this whole time? I hope not. Okay, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and they go to one alternate universe in the entire movie. One. And I guess some like kind of fun stuff happens there for the audience, but it effectively doesn't matter. The way they presented it is like you meet these characters that maybe I shouldn't spoil like it only came out a year ago, but you meet these characters that like it seems like they're never gonna come back. And the reason I know that is because there was a lot of noise about John Krasinski being cast as Mr. Fantastic in this movie. He shows up in this one alternate dimension they go to. And, you know, Fantastic Four movies coming out in a couple of years, and the cast for that movie hasn't been released. I think the whole idea of this alternate universe was just to introduce some characters that we might see in the future, but not necessarily these versions of those characters, because it's just an alternate universe. It could be anybody. So I don't think it really had a lasting effect on me at all. The overall scope of the movie is presented as this one thing, but really it's just Doctor Strange versus Wanda. And you get a little bit of like one-on-one fighting between them. But if the whole movie was just Doctor Strange versus Wanda, that probably would have been cooler than whatever this was. So, yeah, I just don't think it was as effective. And I don't think Sam Raimi was a bad choice for the story. I just think the script was trying to do a lot. Oh, also, the character of America Ferrera is introduced here. And I think the whole point of the movie is that Wanda wants America Ferrera's power or something like that. And Doctor Strange is trying to protect her. It was just stupid. I don't know. Who cares about America Ferrera? Why do I care about her? I think the whole idea is that like America Ferrera can travel dimensions, but like can't everyone else at this point? Like Doctor Strange just traveled it, Wanda just traveled it, Spider-Man I guess almost traveled it. We know the Spider-Man can travel it because of No Way Home. Paul Rudd I guess travels it. Kang the Conqueror travels it. Why do we care about this little girl? It's just bizarre. I just don't understand it. I'm sure I'm like probably not really understanding the character, but as a viewer who's seen almost all the Marvel movies and maybe just one or two Marvel shows, I feel like it should have been way clearer to me what was going on. So, yeah. You know what? Actually, I'm gonna switch. I'm gonna go Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness at 23 and Avengers: Age of Ultron at 22. Ultron's fine. Number 21, I have Thor. Everyone forgets about Thor because Thor Ragnarok was such a hit, which I don't blame them because like Thor Ragnarok was great, but Thor was a pretty awesome origin story. I love Natalie Portman in this movie. I wish she was just in more movies in general. I feel like we need more of her. All the actors were just great in this. Idris Elba coming in clutch. He was pretty awesome in this movie too. Yeah, I don't know, just like a fun time. Chris Hemsworth isn't really funny in this movie. I mean, there's some laughs, but just overall, like good story, good way to paint a whole picture. It felt like it was setting itself up for some really cool stuff, and then the Dark World didn't really deliver. But yeah, I just think it's slightly underrated. All right, number 20, I have Iron Man 2. I think the conclusion to Iron Man 2 is pretty weak. It's basically just like Iron Man and Rhodey like fighting in a little garden. But I like the scene when they're, I think, in Congress, and Iron Man basically like takes over the hearing. That's really fun. I like Don Cheadle as War Machine. This was his first movie, I think, and yeah, he was great. So a lot of fun stuff here. I just don't think it like ended that well, but yeah, number 20. All right, we're getting into the zone of like kind of mid, kind of not. And a lot of this stuff obviously is like personal preference. I'll try to explain my choices as we go, but let me know in the Q&A if you disagree. Where was I wrong? I'd love to hear. Number 19, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. This movie I think is a lot of fun because we know all of the Guardians already, and so they introduced like one or two new characters, but a lot of this is just like more adventures with the same. And I think the reason it's a little lower on my list than it probably, some people who love the Guardians franchise may have it is just because it felt like it didn't really add anything to the greater story. You have this whole thing with Chris Pratt's dad, or not Chris Pratt, but the character Peter Quill, Star-Lord, and his dad is basically the villain. All that stuff was like fun. There's some really fun moments in here, some decent action, but I just felt like when the movie ended, I was just looking at the credits and being like, that movie didn't really need to exist. I didn't really feel like it added much to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Didn't really feel like it added that much to the characters, maybe bar of like Gamora and Nebula's characters and their relationship coming into Infinity War and Endgame. But yeah, some good laughs, not nearly as funny as some of the other movies that I'll be talking about, which maybe also detracts from it a little bit. Overall, like a decently fun time though. Number 18, this is where I'm going to put Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. I think Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 might be slightly funnier than Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. There's, definitely some good laughs here. But yeah, I think that a lot of this movie probably didn't need to really be there. I wanted to see way more about the villain. I wanted Paul Rudd and Jonathan Majors to be interacting a lot more than they did. They did, have a good fight sequence or two, but yeah, there's just a lot of things in here. And with a cast this good and with a cast this funny, I'm like, get rid of everyone else. Just like focus. I want Paul Rudd on the screen like 90% of the time. So that's all I'll add on top of what I said earlier. All right, number 17, I have Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. This was a fun watch. Just like kind of like bullet points. Angela Bassett, fantastic. The music, fantastic again. I think they honored Chadwick Boseman very well at the start of the movie, at the end of the movie, and just throughout the movie. I think they really handled the fact that he was dead, and in the movie, like Black Panther is dead, very well. They made it part of the script. It wasn't just frivolous and off to the side. It was a core part of the struggle that all of the characters are kind of going through. I like Namor as a villain. He, was a little softer than he probably needed to be. But I almost like the fact that they've kind of kept him open as somebody who could return in later movies. Good visuals. The overall themes and like message of the movie is but definitely weaker than the original. But a lot to love here. I think one thing that Marvel struggles with in general is just closing out their movies. the last 30, 45 minutes of this movie, really the last like battle sequence and everything leading up to it and the actual fight itself is pretty subpar compared to everything before it. And I think a lot of movies kind of struggle with that. What are some things that fit into that list? Maybe Doctor Strange. Some of the Spider-Man movies kind of feel that way. Even some of the best movies, I think the endings just aren't great. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is the same. So that's definitely a big issue I have with this one. But overall, it was really fun. Everything with the sirens, everything with the oh gosh, what are they called? Like the Black Panther female warriors. Let me look it up. The Dora Milaje. They're great. A lot of really cool action sequences in the first half of this movie from them. Just like some really badass moments when they're walking into the UN and all that stuff. That was just great. So yeah, I think one of those franchises that just like has introduced a lot of awesome characters, and now we just know them so well, so they're able to pull off these like badass moments where maybe not much happens, but it's just like, oh man, here we go, we're in a Black Panther movie. So yeah, had a lot of fun. Number 16, I have Spider-Man Homecoming here at number 16. This is the first solo Tom Holland movie in his currently 3 movies that he's made as like a solo Spider-Man. This is on the heels of Captain America Civil War, where we first meet him. And it's basically like a coming of age movie. He's a young Spider-Man hungry for action, and Tony Stark, aka Iron Man, is basically just, trying to make him a better Avenger, but in that process, obviously they conflict, and it's the classic, like, you're not ready, but I want to be ready story that Spider-Man often has to go through. I think I have it lower than the other Spider-Man movies just because of that. I think it's just like kind of formulaic. It's very much like a genre coming of age story that you can pretty much predict how it's going to go. I think its strongest suits are the villain. I loved seeing Michael Keaton in this movie. And I guess just like meeting these characters that we now have had like a 5+ year relationship with. Zendaya and I think his name is Nate. Oh, it's not Nate, it's Ned. Played by Jacob Batalon, I think. And he's cool. Donald Glover's in this movie. Love Donald Glover. But yeah, I just think that like there's not a lot in here that really surprised me. But, I like Tom Holland, and I'm happy that this is the lowest Spider-Man movie that I have on the list. Number 16. We'll be seeing a lot more of him later in the list. Number 15. Now we're getting into, top half. These are movies that I consider good. And if you haven't seen these movies, I definitely recommend that you check them out. They're all on Disney+. Doctor Strange is my 15th movie on the list. This is Benedict Cumberbatch's first movie in the franchise. And yeah, this is coming off the heels of a big wave of Benedict Cumberbatch being just like a very famous person in the cultural fabric. He was in the TV show Sherlock. He was in 12 Years a Slave. He was in The Imitation Game, which he got a lot of Oscar buzz for. And he was in The Hobbit. And then he does Doctor Strange in 2016. And so I think the world just had a really good relationship with him. And so it was very exciting to see him in this huge universe, and then obviously become such a big part of what happens later in the series. This movie is really, really cool visually. I think that is its greatest strength. All of the stuff in like the mirror dimension and all of the fight scenes, some of them were a little overwhelming to the point where like I didn't know what was going on, but the ones that did worked really well. I love Tilda Swinton in this movie, and Mads Mikkelsen was really great too. I think the weakest part of it, and don't take this wrong way because I love her, was Rachel McAdams. She's great in it. Like, I don't think my problem is with her, but the character was just like very much like on the side, which is obviously the point because he's, not making time for her or whatever. But I just wanted more from her. And she's really not in the second movie. Like, she's in it for like 5 seconds. And that was a huge mistake that they made. Like, they need to get her involved. If she's going to be in the movie, like, put her in the movie, Fun times. Number 14, Spider-Man Far From Home. This is a sick movie. Jake Gyllenhaal is the main villain. I think they were just really creative when they came up with this idea of somebody who is not a superhero but basically pretends to be one. Yeah, all the drone stuff, the final fight sequence, Zendaya finding out who Spider-Man is. I'm just gonna call her Zendaya. I know she's like MJ, but she's Zendaya. Um, it was really cool having a movie where Spider-Man becomes somebody on his own. You had the coming of age story. That's the first movie, and this is like kind of coming of age, or more so just like what does it mean to be a superhero? That's the whole point of the movie, and I think they delivered on it really well. Has a really cool ending where Jake Gyllenhaal, before he dies, I don't know the character's name. Jake Gyllenhaal, Mysterio is his name. Yeah, Mysterio reveals the identity of Spider-Man in like the post-credit sequence, and that was such a fun way to be like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for the next Spider-Man movie. So yeah, if you haven't seen this one, it's great. A lot of cool fight stuff in here, and yeah, like I said, underrated. Number 13 is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I think the first hour and a half of this movie was like pretty awesome. It felt like a very original story. Obviously, these are all comic book adaptations, but I had never heard of Shang-Chi. I think a lot of people hadn't. It was very exciting to get an Asian superhero in the mix. They had a lot of cool set pieces, and I think the story had a lot of intrigue. That might be one of the good things I have to say about its stop. Although I think those hold a lot of weight. Like I said, the issue with a lot of these movies is the way they close them out. The last act of this movie is just it's just like a fight scene with like maybe like a couple cool seconds in it. There's really not a lot to say about what goes down. It's very unmemorable. Uh, it seems like the legend, or rather, the Ten Rings themselves are a very powerful weapon, and you do get that because his dad is the main villain, and he's obviously a hard villain to beat, but he does beat him. So, like, are the Ten Rings that crazy? I don't know. It's just I just wish they made some of these villains like actually hard to beat. You know, like every one of these movies has to have a villain, and so you just gotta make some of them like good. Besides like the main guy, like besides Thanos or besides Kang, like make a couple more of them actually hard to beat. You know. Anyway, I think the stuff I said earlier about like it being an Asian story and it just feeling like fresh, like it has a lot of kung fu elements to it as well. I think that was like sick. So yeah, that's at number 13. Like I said, a lot of these movies could probably be switched around, and I wouldn't blame anyone for doing that. But for me, it's number 13. Number 12 is Ant-Man. Paul Rudd. He's great. Michael Douglas. He's awesome. Michael Pena is so funny in this. It's just such a fun time, and it doesn't take itself too seriously. The final fight sequence takes place in a kid's bedroom, and they're fighting as like little ants on top of a toy train set. It's so much fun. It doesn't require any outside knowledge of the world or the story, and they even insert a segment where he's lost in the quantum realm for 5 minutes, which obviously introduces you to that whole concept, and later on is super relevant to everything. But I think here they did it just barely enough to where it's just fun. You don't have to get lost and be like, wait, how does this work? It's just like 5 minutes of the movie. Yeah, super entertaining. Just a fun character to watch. I hope Paul Rudd is just in every Marvel movie because he's awesome. And finally, but before I get into the top 10, my number 11 pick here is Captain America: The First Avenger. Chris Evans is awesome in this. I just think like the character of Captain America is so fun and so easy to love. And all the stuff with him being like a little scrawny kid and his friend Bucky being like his best friend despite them just like living very different lives. All the stuff with the military training and the serum and that whole scene where he becomes Captain America and he's shirtless and he's ripped. In that first time where you see him running on the street and he's like figuring out how his new body works. All of that's awesome. The initial him being strong and him actually leading an army. It's just, there's a lot of fun stuff in here that when you look back on, you're like, man, I can't believe this is like the start of it all. The villain is like kind of stupid. I guess it's like related to Hydra, but yeah, very unmemorable in my mind. But then that's not how the movie ends. Like the movie ends with Captain America having to crash the plane and he gets frozen. That whole thing, and then he wakes up and he's like in Times Square or something. All that stuff is sick. It's just such a cool, like, complete story. So Captain America, the first Avenger, I think also slightly underrated. People forget about this movie because there's so many other cool Captain America movies, but this one's great. Alrighty. Top 10 Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. Here we go. Number 10. I Have an Army. Yeah, we have a Hulk. It's the Avengers. When this movie came out in, I guess, 2012, this was an event. This was huge. I mean, I remember the feeling of being like, holy crap, 6 awesome superheroes in a circle with like epic music playing. This is the greatest thing ever. It's crazy to believe that like this now kind of looks like a small movie compared to something like Endgame or even like No Way Home. But yeah, it was so much fun, and you get all the great banter between Iron Man and Captain America, and right off the bat, they have this like tense relationship that's sort of the point of the movie, as is the point of like most Avengers movies, is like these guys don't get along. But all their banter, all of the Bruce Banner and Tony Stark banter, Black Widow being like nice to Bruce Banner, I guess that was her role, is that like she's the nice one. More importantly with Black Widow was like her fight scenes with Hawkeye were really, really great. All the stuff with Nick Fury, it's just sick. I mean, there's just so much fun stuff in here. Fairly predictable plot when you actually look at the movie. Like, okay, they're not going to get along and then they're going to get along. Sure. But I just think it was done really well. And at the time, just felt like the most fun movie event that had occurred in a while. Number 9. I'm going with Guardians of the Galaxy at number 9. When I watched it for the first time, I was so surprised at how unique it felt, how funny, truly funny it was. You have Bradley Cooper as a raccoon. You have Vin Diesel as a tree. There's just like insane stuff happening in this movie. And it was just refreshing to see Marvel take themselves a little less seriously. That's really all I have to say about it. It was just a fantastically fun ride. Number 8. And this might be a little low for this movie on a lot of people's list, but let me explain. This is Black Panther. Chadwick Boseman, R.I.P. This movie was really cool because we meet Black Panther in another movie that I'll be talking about soon. So this is kind of an origin story, except for the fact that we already know this guy. It's the same thing as Spider-Man Homecoming, where let's see a coming of age story, but instead what we see here is a really interesting and nuanced look at the world of Wakanda and who these people are. And, you know, Ryan Coogler, who directed this movie, does such a good job with these very important and oftentimes on the nose themes. And I think he does it really well with Michael B. Jordan playing Killmonger and introducing him as a villain that's almost stronger than Black Panther is without his magical serum or whatever. All that stuff is great. All the stuff that felt like The Lion King, all that Shakespearean stuff where he's seeing his dad and it's about, you know, who am I compared to who my dad was and who he stood for. All that stuff is just awesome. I think the reason it's not higher is just because some of the action sequences and some of the dialogue were just really, really like not my favorite. I'm specifically thinking about the time where like Shuri is like, "What are those?" Like she makes that joke, and yeah, it was like kind of cute, but also there was like moments like that where sometimes the dialogue was just like really obvious and really cringy, and yeah, it just wasn't for me. And then some of the CGI and stuff just I think doesn't hold up as great as some other movies that are higher on the list. But overall, fantastic movie. I think Chadwick Boseman was fantastic in this and everything else he's done. He's definitely, you know, really tragic death, and he reminds me of Heath Ledger in that sense, where like you look at his final movies and you're like, man, what if he was just around for 10, 20, 30 years? Like, would he be considered the greatest that we have? I really think that Chadwick Boseman would be in that conversation. All right, number 7 is Thor Ragnarok. This was the rebranding, refreshed version of Thor after 2 movies that a lot of people didn't really care for. Chris Hemsworth has even admitted that he was really getting sick of the character Thor because it just wasn't fun. He's just this guy who speaks in an accent and is always serious. He's like, give me something else to do. I can do more. And they got Taika Waititi to write and direct this movie. and immediately you can tell that it's completely different tonally and story wise. It's you have these like big powerful villains, but you don't really care. Well, what you really care about is how much fun everyone's having on screen. This is where we get the Hulk as the Hulk, where he can talk and he's like a character that's more than just Hulk smash. And all the banter between Loki and Thor was just great. All those side characters, Valkyrie's introduction. There's just a lot of fun characters in here, and again, no one's taking themselves seriously. Perhaps the person who doesn't take themselves seriously at all is Jeff Goldblum. Holy shit, he's Jeff Goldblum. Oh my god, what is he doing in a Marvel movie? It's so crazy that he's there. I'm so happy that they cast him because, like, if you're gonna do a movie where nothing really matters and it's just kind of for fun, who else besides the master of silly? Oh my gosh, Jeff Goldblum. He was so good in this. Yeah, this movie is just like great. If this was number one on your list, valid. It's just awesome. I don't really have like bad things to say about it. I just think that the movies that are ahead of it hold even more significance than this one. But you can't get more game changing than a movie that literally took a franchise and just spun it on its head. I heard Thor Love and Thunder was not great, partly because it just tried to be Thor Ragnarok again when it really didn't have to be that. So, Thor Ragnarok, really just like one and done, awesome stuff. Number 6 is Iron Man. Again, if you had this at number 1 on your list, valid. Iron Man is the movie that set us on this crazy journey that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the first place. Famously, it's Robert Downey Jr.'s comeback movie and comeback story. And it's great. It's a really tight movie. Robert Downey Jr. is so good in this. He's so funny. And obviously, like, now we think about him as this guy who is always doing this like charming, charismatic thing. But I think this was the first time that he really like did it. And everybody was like, whoa, that guy's awesome. I want to be that guy. So yeah, all that's great. All that stuff about like him being a, quote unquote bad person, an arrogant person, doesn't really think about what his company does, and then going through hell and all that stuff where he's making the Iron Man suit is super fun, and then breaking out and then coming back to America and just questioning everything. It's just great. It's just like classic stuff where it's like bad guy turns good and you love him the entire time. For an early movie, the action sequences still kind of hold up. CGI, for the most part, is decent. So, yeah, Iron Man, number 6. Number 5. Top 5 Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. I'm going with Avengers Endgame here. Avengers Endgame was quite literally the movie event of all time. It is the highest grossing movie to exist. Maybe that mantle will be taken by Avatar: The Way of Water. Maybe it won't. But yeah, this was quite literally the event of the decade or the century. What are you gonna say? I think the thing I liked about it the most is that it was almost back to basics. So you had like the original Avengers squad kind of walking and talking together, but you see how their relationships have changed, and you have all this like baggage with them and almost this nostalgia factor that I think works pretty well the entire time here. If you like the Thor movies, you have all that stuff with the Thor set pieces. If you liked the characters of Black Widow and Hawkeye, you wanted to see more of them, great. They're in this movie a ton. All the stuff between Iron Man and Captain America and them kind of being friends again and understanding each other to a very high level. I think that stuff ages really well. Yeah. A little long, definitely. But I think a really awesome, epic conclusion to the multiverse saga. And yeah, just tells a really, really complete story. Number 4 on my list is Spider-Man No Way Home. If you haven't seen this movie, I'm going to spoil it. Because, like, you know what this movie is. Like, I know you know. Don't lie to yourself. If you're like, I don't know what it is, don't tell me. It's too late. There's 3 Spider-Man in this movie. They're back. And it's so awesome. I had so much fun watching this movie in theaters. And I know we all, know that happened. So I want to talk about other things that I think really elevate it to top 5 here. Um, Aunt May dies? Did we forget about this? That was insane. I really did not expect that to happen. Green Goblin as a villain and just being this like maniac, all that stuff was amazing. The Spidey sense scene where you see Peter Parker, realize something's wrong, and you just follow him in this kind of hyper aware state for a minute before he realizes Green Goblin is now Green Goblin. All that stuff is awesome. I think like honestly the part that I just found a little cringy was when Andrew Garfield saves Zendaya, and like it's like, oh, he saved the girl because Emma Stone died in his movie. Like, yeah, that was like fine, but like I don't know, wasn't it super predictable? Like, whatever. That's probably my least favorite part of it. All the Spider-Man banter, all of the stuff at the end where he's forgotten and he is now like purely Spider-Man. Like, we saw his coming of age story, we saw his what does it mean to be a hero story, and now it's like he knows what it means to be a hero, and he makes that choice himself by the end of the movie, and is just left to be solely Spider-Man. I found that to be so powerful and so epic. I'm like, I can't wait to see him like pair up with Daredevil in another movie. Now he's just like out being himself. So yeah, great movie. I love Tom Holland as Spider-Man. I'm not gonna do the whole like which one's better. I'm just saying I love Tom Holland as Spider-Man. He's great. I think he's honestly, I think he's underrated as a Spider-Man. This movie gave him a lot to do, and I think he did really well. Number 3, Captain America: Civil War. Now, this movie had like a huge impact culturally. You had like the whole like Team Cap, Team Iron Man thing. I remember on Twitter it was like, "Yo, use a hashtag Team Iron Man." No, Team Captain America. All that stuff was like fun to interact with. I just think that like all Avengers movies are about like, oh my gosh, they're not gonna get along, but are they gonna get along? But okay, now they're gonna get along. But are they gonna get along? All that stuff. This movie actually does it well because the stakes end up becoming so high by the end of the movie, where like you think you understand what's happening, and then when you really understand what's happening, you're like, oh no, there's just no way they're coming back from this. And it's true. I mean, it takes them a couple of movies. It's not until Avengers Endgame, like the middle of the movie, when they kind of reconcile from the fallout that occurs in this one. All of the stuff where it's like they're getting ready to fight each other, the actual fight that occurs, the introduction of Tom Holland Spider-Man in this, Ant-Man coming in randomly for the fight, the introduction of Black Panther was incredible. I think Chadwick Boseman's entrance into this and his father dying in this, all that stuff is sick. The final sequence where Iron Man like 1v2s and like almost wins basically. All that, it's just they're just back-to-back bangers. The whole theme where they're able to balance this conflict with the Avengers and also this moral conflict with the Black Panther versus Bucky, and Black Panther being like, I'm not going to let vengeance consume me any longer, and then him using that as an ideal in his Black Panther movie. I mean, that just aged so well. They just worked that in so seamlessly. So yeah, I mean, it's above Endgame for me because Endgame has like twice or 3 times the amount of characters, and they aren't able to achieve nearly the level of depth that they're able to get in this one, where they have like 12 people and they're able to like really build on almost like all of the character stories. So yeah, really, really good stuff here. Number 2, I have Avengers Infinity War. I just love the fact that the heroes don't win. You see a lot of the flaws of the heroes. You see them turning to a darker side. You see them lose hope, truly lose hope. And you get Thanos being just the best villain that we've seen in a long, long time. Josh Brolin killed it as Thanos, quite literally. I mean, he was so good in this role. All the fight sequences are great. I like the fact that everybody was split up and no one party in that movie felt like they had too much time. The part that I probably would cut the most is like the whole Thor going off to get his hammer stuff. That part's like a little weak. But his re-entrance into the fight, really strong. So, you gotta have a little bit of both, Yeah, fun times, man. All right, I know I'm gone a little long, so let's wrap it up. Number 1, and in my opinion, the best Marvel Cinematic Universe movie out there is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This is the second installment in the Captain America franchise. This is the story where we are introduced to Bucky again, but this time as a villain. Some of the best action sequences in the entire universe are in this movie. I think the most powerful aspect of it is that it's more so this thriller crime movie, not even crime, like thriller spy movie, than it is a superhero movie. You have all the stuff with Steve and Black Widow, Natasha, being spies and having to sneak around and having to interrogate people. You have some really, really awesome set pieces towards the end, and this is one of the few movies that I think the last fight sequence actually holds up really well. I don't think I would change much about that. It obviously takes place on this huge stage, and you understand the stakes of it, but I think they did it really well, and it ends with this very, very powerful moment between the hero and the villain that you want to get along. So many memorable moments, from the elevator fight to the highway fight with Bucky. And there was a moment in that movie where I was like, oh, Black Widow's gonna die. Like, she's dying in this scene. Like, the music cuts out and she's just running, and then she gets shot in the back or the shoulder. And I'm like, oh yeah, she's gonna die here. That's crazy. I mean, they did it really well. Yeah, just the emotional core. Like, I'm with you till the end. Steve Rogers and Bucky, man, that's friendship goals. It's so tough to justify why this is at number one when you have so many movies that, like, in the top 10 that I just love. But as a complete story, it's so hard to make a story that isn't able to bring in more characters for, these like arcs that you can build on a larger scale. This is such a, like, it's an isolated story. You have Captain America and Black Widow, and then Nick Fury is like the boss man character. Oh yeah, Nick Fury, fantastic in this movie. All that stuff where, like, they're talking and he has to lay low, and it's Hydra, Shield is Hydra. All that stuff is great. Yeah. Oh, this is the only movie where you really see Black Widow and Captain America flirting, which was so much fun. I mean, like, the sexual tension that they have, that was just like the whole middle of the movie, and I was like, yeah, I'm into this. And then, like, she, like, turns around and just, like, hits on Bruce Banner at one bar scene in Age of Ultron, and then that they're just in love for the rest of the series. I don't really get that. I liked when we saw Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson flirt. That was awesome. All right, a little basic at the end there, but there's my number one. What are your thoughts? What's your number one Marvel movie? What did I get wrong? What am I underrating here? Let me know in the Q&A down below. Otherwise, thanks so much for joining me. This is Video Village, and I'll see you next week. Special thanks to my lovely girlfriend Krupa Patel for the podcast's artwork, and my good friend Kevin Cow for the music that you're listening to now. You can find more of his music on Instagram at Waiguang Beats. Thanks, y'all.